Welcome back. As we are discussing about the access control and type of access control and the access control strategies in the previous session, now we'll try to discuss the access control with the identification. So, what is the identification and how the authorizations are used that we'll discuss in this session. So, identification enforces the rules established by the authorization policy. So, a subject or any individual requests the access to a system resources. So, every time the subject requests access to a resource, the access control determine whether to grant or deny access. For example, the authorization policy determines what activities a user can perform on a resource. So, a unique identifier ensures the proper association between allowed activities and subjects. So, a username is the most common method used to identify a user. So, a username can be an alphanumeric combination, a personal identification number that is PIN, a smart card, or biometric, such as your fingerprints, retina scan, or your voice recognition. So, a unique identifier ensures that a system can identify each user individually. So, therefore, allowing an authorized user to perform the appropriate action on a particular resource. So, in identification control, that the cybersecurity policy that determines which identification controls should be used. So the sensitivity of the information and information systems determine how stringent the controls. So the increase in data breaches has forced many organizations to strengthen their identification controls. For example, the credit card industry in the United States requires all vendors to convert to smart card identification system like this, right? So then what you know that for authentication method, the second one, it comes the authentication method. So in the authentication method, it allows you that what you know for authentication method. So in this, the passwords, the passphrases, or personal identification number pins are all examples of something that the user knows. So the passwords are the most popular method used for authentication. So the term passphrase, passcode, passkey, or PIN are generally referred to as passwords. So a password is a string of characters used to prove a user's identity. So if this string of characters relates back to a user, such as a name, birth date, or address, so it will be easier for cyber criminals to guess a user's password. So a number of publications recommended that a password be at least 8 characters, and users should not create a password that is so long that it is difficult to memorize, or conversely, so short that it becomes vulnerable to password cracking. So passwords should contain a combination of upper and lower case letters, numbers, and special characters. So users need to use different passwords for different systems, because if a criminal cracked the user's password once, the criminal will have access to all of a user's account. So a password manager can help a user create and remember strong passwords. So this is what you know for authentication method. Another one is what you have for authentication. So for what you have for authentication, is the smart cards and security key fobs are both examples of something that users have in their the possession. So the smart card security, as you see here, a smart card is a small plastic card about the size of a credit card with a small chip embedded on it, that you find this chip. So this chip is an intelligent data carrier capable of processing, storing, and safeguarding data. So smart cards store private information such as your bank account number, personal identification, medical records, and digital signatures. So smart cards provide authentication and encryption to keep data safe. Another is for authentication methods, you may use what you have means the security key fob. So a security key fob is a device that is small enough to attach to a key ring. So it uses a process called two factor authentication, which is more secure than a username and password combination. So, first, the user enters a personal identification number, that is PIN. If correctly entered, the security key fob will display a number. So, this is the second factor which the user must enter to log into the device or network. Another authentication method is what you are, or sorry, who you are. So that is a unique physical characteristic such as fingerprint, retina, or voice that identifies a specific user is called your biometrics. So biometric security compares physical characteristics against stored profiles to authenticate users. So a profile is a data file containing known characteristics of an individual. The system grants the user access if his or her characteristics match saved settings. A fingerprint reader is a common biometric device. So there are two types of biometric identifiers. One is physical characteristics, another one is behavior characteristics. In the physical characteristics includes your fingerprints, DNA, face, hands, retina, or ear features. Whereas your behavioral characteristics that include patterns of behavior such as your gestures, voice, typing rhythm, or the way a user walks. So biometrics is becoming increasingly popular in public security systems and consumer electronics and point of sales application. So implementing biometrics uses a reader or the scanning device. So software that converts the scanned information into digital form and a database that stores biometric data for comparison. So these are three different ways that you know who you are, what you know, and what you have. So these are three different methods to know about this uh, for authentication purpose. And next one is another very interesting method is multi-factor authentication. So in multi-factor authentication uses at least two methods of verification. So a security key fob is a good example for this multi-factor authentication. So the two factors are something you know, such as your passwords, and something you have, such as the security key fob. So take this a step further by adding something you are, such as your fingerprint scan. So, multi factor authentication can reduce the incidence of online identity theft because knowing the password would not give cyber criminals access to user information. For example, an online banking website might require a password and a PIN that the user receives on his or her smartphone. As shown in the figure, you can see here the withdrawing a cash from ATM is another example of multi-factor authentication. The user must have the back bank card and know the pin before the ATM will dispense the cash. So these are some of the authentication methods. In the next session, we'll try to discuss the what is the authorization method, or what is authorization, so that it will comes under the category of your access control to protecting the secrets.